Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are embarking on a mission, one that I think is crucial for anyone who really considers themselves well-informed. We're going to be mastering the art of articulation, specifically how to describe that, nuanced, complex, often contradictory landscape of human emotion.
Yeah.
Our mission, really, is to move you far beyond that conversational roadblock of just saying, I'm fine, or, the descriptive poverty of I'm tired.
That is exactly right. I mean, for the curious learner, knowing a complex topic is only the first step.
Right.
The true test of sophistication, really, is communicating the texture and the depth of your experience.
Texture, I like that.
Yeah. Whether it's a reaction to geopolitical news, a shift in organizational strategy, or just a profound moment of personal realization. Our sources today really treat language as a sophisticated instrument.
Not just a blunt tool.
Exactly. Not just a blunt tool for information transfer.
Okay, so let's unpack this immediately. We've all been there, right? That moment in a high-stakes professional or social setting where someone asks you about a sensitive topic.
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel about the merger? Or how are you dealing with this setback? And our immediate answer is just this generic, unhelpful summary.
We default to simplicity because complexity feels messy.
It feels messy, yeah. But those simple words, they just flatten our reality, don't they? They erase the specific layers, the internal debates, the very real human investment involved.
Precisely. And the challenge here is both psychological and linguistic. It's one thing to internally register, say, stress mixed with excitement, but it is an entirely different skill to articulate that specific blend in a way that resonates with a listener.
Okay, so we're seeking clarity, but also something more.
We're seeking precision and sophistication. We need to leave behind the basic vocabulary, happy, sad, mad, and start to utilize, specialized adjectives, metaphors, and phrasal verbs that really paint a high-resolution portrait of our inner world.
So, the goal of this deep dive, then, is to equip you with the strategic linguistic tools to do just that. We're providing the vocabulary that turns a simple feeling into a compelling, insightful narrative, especially when the emotional ground isn't a flat field, but a really challenging dynamic landscape. So, we're starting with what I think is the trickiest territory. These are situations where feelings are inherently mixed. They involve internal struggle or contrasting elements or even dual motivations.
In these moments, they often carry the highest relational stakes.
Absolutely.
The ability to articulate internal conflict. I mean, to just admit you're simultaneously wrestling with two opposing but valid responses is a huge marker of maturity.
And trustworthiness, I'd imagine.
And trustworthiness, especially in leadership roles.
Yeah.
It signals that you're considering multiple angles and you're not just, blindly operating in these emotional binaries.
Okay, so let's dive into our first concrete scenario from the source material. It's a political minefield, really. Declining a desirable promotion without sounding ungrateful or lazy or, resistant to change.
This is a classic example of where you need precision in your articulation. If you simply say, no, I don't want it, that just sounds so dismissive of the opportunity.
Right. It can imply you're not ambitious or you think the job is beneath you.
Exactly. So the masterful linguistic solution that the sources suggest is to frame the decision using strategic language. The strategy was to tell the decision maker, I'm incredibly flattered and grateful for the offer, but I feel quite conflicted.
Okay. The word conflicted. That's the game changer here. But wait a second. Couldn't saying you're conflicted sound indecisive, especially if you're interviewing for a leadership role. How do the sources suggest we balance that complexity with the necessary confidence?
That is a brilliant challenge, and the source material addresses it directly. Conflicted works precisely because you pair it with the confident, I'm incredibly flattered.
Okay.
The conflict isn't about whether the offer is good. You've already affirmed that it is. The conflict is between the offer and another deeply held priority.
Like a commitment to your current team, or maybe work-life balance.
Or a specific strategic direction you want to pursue, exactly.
So conflicted instantly signals that this isn't a simple rejection. It's an internal cost-benefit analysis. You've acknowledged the value, but you're prioritizing an even higher value.
Precisely. It frames the entire situation as a respectful intellectual process.
Yeah.
Rather than, a knee-jerk emotional refusal.
And that word conflict, the etymology of it.
Well, the etymology of conflict, a clashing or struggle, means you are implicitly telling the listener you have wrestled with this decision. You are seen as thoughtful and strategic.
And you avoid that negative inference of being ungrateful.
You do. And the long-term relational benefit is that the boss views you as complex and dedicated, just, currently prioritizing different goals.
I can see how we can apply this to other professional contexts too. Think about managing a difficult vendor or a client relationship. You can't just say, I hate this.
No, absolutely not.
But you could say, I feel conflicted about continuing this partnership. Your team delivers exceptional quality, but the communication process is creating unacceptable delays.
And that works perfectly because it validates the positive while introducing the necessary negative. It's an exercise in relational maturity. You demonstrate that you see the whole picture, not just the part that is frustrating you.
Okay, let's move on to a different arena of internal complexity, those profound emotions where basic words just fall utterly short. Our source material mentions the overwhelming experience of encountering historical sites, maybe in Rome or Egypt, where a word like amazed just felt entirely inadequate to describe the emotional and intellectual blow.
This happens so often when you confront scale or time or beauty that is just so far beyond your normal frame of reference.
Right. Amazed feels shallow.
It feels too shallow, like you're describing a parlor trick. You need language that conveys depth and a real physical impact.
So the sources introduce this great phrase, utterly bowled over. The effectiveness of this is really rooted in its physicality, isn't it?
Absolutely. The phrasal verb bowled over implies a strong, forceful, almost physical impact, like a shock wave. It means the emotion was powerful enough to stop you, to shift your equilibrium.
It's like it moved beyond just intellectual processing.
Yes, it moved beyond that, wow, that's beautiful, and manifested as a sudden destabilizing force in the body.
It's the difference between merely observing a historical site and feeling the sheer weight of 2,000 years of history just pressing down on you. The emotion has literally taken you out of that moment of conscious control.
And that's a powerful distinction. Furthermore, the sources suggest that these experiences are rarely monolithic. To capture the full scope, you need contrasting adjectives. The feeling wasn't just powerful, it was also described as exhilarating, yet also a bit daunting.
I really appreciate that pairing. Exhilarating implies this immense, stimulating joy and energy, that rush of discovery.
Right.
But daunting implies feeling overwhelmed, maybe small, or even slightly fearful of the sheer scale of the achievement or the history you are confronting.
And the combination is essential. When you articulate exhilarating but daunting, you're communicating the duality that defines these profound experiences.
The exhilaration from the connection and the wonder.
And the daunting feeling comes from realizing your own brief insignificance or the immense challenges human history has overcome.
So it signals to the listener that you're not just capable of reacting, you're capable of processing and synthesizing two vastly different emotional inputs at the same time.
Exactly. You're recognizing the thrill and the historical weight in the same breath. This complexity is what defines true articulation in these high-stakes personal moments.
Okay, now we pivot to the negative space, which, let's be honest, occupies so much of our daily emotional currency: stress, anger, and disappointment. The generic labels here, I'm stressed, I'm mad, are probably the most common culprits for poor communication.
I'd agree with that. The main problem with generic negative labels is that they're conversational dead ends. They invite nothing but a generic response, like, sorry to hear that. By moving to percentage descriptions, you provide the context and the narrative that's required for genuine empathy and action.
So let's take the scenario provided by the sources. You're running desperately late for a crucial meeting, you're stuck in gridlock, it's pouring rain, and someone asks how you are. Instead of stressed, the sources highly recommend the adjective harried.
Harried is a masterpiece of precision in this context. If we unpack the mechanics of that word, harried is about more than just internal mental pressure. Its etymology ties back to Old English.
Oh, really?
Meaning to harass, trouble, or even plunder, often in the context of a military raid.
Wow, so it's like being actively persecuted by circumstances.
Exactly. It suggests an external force, time, weather. Traffic is actively pursuing you and putting you under duress.
You're not just stressed, you're flustered, rushed.
And perhaps slightly persecuted by the events unfolding around you. When you tell a colleague you are harried, you immediately establish that context of external struggle.
Which is so much more likely to get sympathy than if you just say you're stressed, which could just imply you didn't plan well.
Precisely. It's the difference between self-inflicted pressure and external assault.
I'd much rather hear someone say they're harried. It makes me instantly visualize the struggle rather than say frazzled, which sounds more scatterbrained, or frenzied, which sounds out of control. Harried suggests controlled urgency.
It allows you to communicate the urgency without sacrificing your professional composure. It states, I am managing a difficult situation that is external to my competence.
Okay, let's move to the spectrum of anger. Angry is just a flat line. If you are truly furious, we need stronger verbs. The sources recommend distinguishing between seething and livid.
And this is a crucial psychological distinction. When you use these words, you inform the listener not only of the severity, but of the manifestation of your anger.
The manifestation. How so?
Well, seething describes internalized, suppressed, simmering rage. You are metaphorically boiling beneath the surface, actively trying to maintain your composure while the pressure builds.
So the person saying they're seething is likely communicating a massive effort of restraint. You're signaling, I am furious, but I am controlling it for the sake of this interaction.
Precisely. And that nuance is often key in professional settings where you need to communicate severe displeasure without, exploding.
Yeah.
You signal seriousness while maintaining control.
Okay, now what about livid? How is that different?
Livid is different. Its etymological root means bluish or lead-colored. It often referred to the discoloration of the skin, a bruise, or a paleness that results from intense emotion.
So livid implies the anger is externalized, it's immediate, it has reached its peak.
Yes, it speaks to a level of fury that has visibly affected the person.
So if you say you are livid, you are communicating an immediate explosive intensity, a raw, visible fury that requires either immediate resolution or immediate withdrawal.
Right, and choosing between seething, that internal suppression, and livid, the externalized intensity, provides the listener with the tactical information they need about how to proceed.
And that tactical choice matters immensely. Do you need a cool-down period, or do you need a slow, controlled channel for your grievances?
Exactly.
Shifting now to the weight of disappointment. When your hopes are just profoundly crushed, disappointed feels insultingly light. The word suggested in the sources is crestfallen.
Crestfallen is just so rich with visual imagery. Think of its origins. The crest, which in medieval times was the decorative plume or symbol on top of a helmet.
Or like the comb on a rooster.
Or the comb on a rooster, exactly. Yeah. A crestfallen individual is one whose plume, whose pride, their confidence, their spirit has collapsed.
It paints a picture of physical drooping, a visible loss of spirit, a palpable sense of dejection. It means the disappointment is so profound it has physically affected your posture, your outlook.
That physical connection is key to empathy. And the source material instructs us to connect this feeling back to its cause using another phrase, set your heart on something.
Ah, that's powerful language layering. So crestfallen describes the severe effect. But set your heart on describes the depth of the emotional investment and the vulnerability that came with it.
Exactly. When you explain that you set your heart on a goal, be it a new role, a partnership, a personal achievement, you're emphasizing that your desire wasn't casual or transactional. It exposes the vulnerability required to invest deeply in an outcome.
So it explains why the disappointment is so profound. It elevates the feeling beyond just a frustrated expectation.
Yes, you communicate the depth of the loss based on the depth of the initial desire.
This allows the listener to fully grasp the emotional geometry. Profound desire led to profound vulnerability, which led to profound loss, expressed as this crestfallen dejection. Finally, in this section, we have to address the most common failing of stress articulation, its abstract nature. If you just complain about being stressed, the listener just tunes out. We need to visualize that abstract stress through metaphor.
Relatability is the currency here. Metaphors are the bridge between your abstract internal feeling and a concrete external experience the listener can instantly visualize and share. They activate the listener's imagination.
So instead of just saying, I'm busy, the sources suggest using these powerful kinetic metaphors like juggling a million things at once.
Or the darker, more dire comparison, drowning in deadlines.
Let's talk about juggling. The power there is that it conveys this precarious instability. The listener instantly visualizes the strain, the impossibility of keeping everything aloft, and that imminent failure.
It transfers the nervous tension to them. They start feeling the need to catch something.
And drowning in deadlines is even stronger because it activates a primal fear, suffocation. It's not just busy, it's an overwhelming existential threat where you are struggling just to keep your head above water.
These metaphors are exponentially superior to just stating a condition because they invite immediate visceral empathy. They tell the listener what it feels like to be in your position right now, forcing them to engage with the intensity of your reality.
And that's sophisticated articulation in action.
That's it, right there.
We've touched on how bowled over implies a physical impact. Let's explore that somatic side a bit further. So many intense emotions, particularly anxiety, fear, profound realization, they're not just mental calculations, are they?
No, not at all. They are lived experiences in the body. They manifest physically.
So using visceral language moves the conversation from the cerebral to the tangible.
Exactly. When you describe the physical sensation of an emotion, you're making it tangible and evocative. The listener can access that feeling instantly because they've likely experienced that sensation themselves, even if the context was totally different.
Okay, so the source material offers some examples for anxiety. The classic idiom is butterflies in my stomach.
Right. And while some might critique this as a cliché, it's a universally understood somatic idiom.
It's a classic for a reason.
It is. It describes that fluttering, light, slightly nervous agitation that's associated with low-level anticipation. It's effective because it is precise. It localizes the feeling to your core, and it suggests lightness in movement, which distinguishes it from, say, dread or heavy stress.
But if that anxiety progresses, the metaphor needs to escalate to match the severity. Our sources suggest the more severe imagery, a knot forming in my chest.
This instantly communicates restriction and heaviness. A knot is tight, it's compressed, and it's constricting.
So the sensation moves from that light movement of butterflies
to severe physical constraint and centralized pain. It bypasses abstract concepts like panic and delivers the raw physical experience of difficulty breathing, of tightness, and concentrated tension.
This shift in physical metaphor allows the listener to grade the emotional severity accurately. You don't need to say, I am 8 out of 10 stressed.
No.
You just describe the physical manifestation and they understand the gravity.
The body language is doing the quantification for you. It's perfect.
And then there's that powerful, immediate visceral sensation when you realize you've made a catastrophic error.
Oh, that feeling.
The reply all horror or accidentally deleting the entire project file.
That moment of sudden dread and collapse needs a dramatic articulation. The sources describe this using the phrase, a sinking feeling washed over me.
That phrase is incredibly evocative. Let's analyze the verb choices there. Sinking and washed over me.
Sinking implies a sudden loss of core stability, often associated with the pit of the stomach just dropping out. It's an internal physical collapse.
And washed over me.
Washed over me suggests it was sudden, overwhelming, and comprehensive, like a tide of cold water. It wasn't a slow realization. It was a sudden submersion beneath a wave of dread.
The combination is almost cinematic. By using these words, you instantly tack into a shared human experience. Everyone knows that feeling of gravity suddenly betraying them.
You bypass intellectual analysis and communicate directly to the listener's nervous system, fostering immediate connection and understanding.
We've done well defining the core emotions, but what about those harder to pin feelings? The ones that aren't clearly positive or negative, the atmosphere of waiting, the fatigue of routine, the general weariness. These feelings often require the most sophisticated vocabulary because they defy simple labels.
They do, because these emotions are often pervasive and atmospheric. They lack a clear, immediate cause, which makes them really difficult to address. They demand, formal vocabulary or specialized idioms to be accurately pinned down and communicated.
Okay, so let's discuss that common, vague feeling of listlessness, the meh feeling, or just not caring. In a formal context, the source suggests using the word apathy.
Right. Apathy is the clinical or formal term for a demonstrable lack of interest, enthusiasm, or concern. It's useful when you need precise, detached language to describe an absence of emotional response.
So in a highly structured environment where you're assessing emotional output, perhaps.
Exactly. It is functional emotional absence.
But for that deeper, almost philosophical weariness, the feeling of having successfully navigated your world only to find yourself profoundly dissatisfied, the sources offer the borrowed French term ennui.
Ennui is so much more sophisticated than simple boredom. Its power lies in its implied cause. A deeper philosophical dissatisfaction that results from a lack of purpose or meaning.
Often after one has achieved a comfortable stagnation.
That's the key. If you are describing the fatigue of existential contemplation where the routine has become meaningless, ennui is the precise term.
It communicates that the issue is not a lack of stimulation, but a lack of significance. It's boredom elevated to a philosophical state.
and it immediately elevates the conversation, signaling that the feeling is rooted in observation and existential contemplation rather than just a simple need for something to do. I think our listeners will appreciate this distinction when they're describing complex professional burnout or creative blocks.
Now, for the more common, routine listlessness, just that feeling of going through the motions without enthusiasm, for this, the source offers a highly visual idiom, being stuck in a rut.
Yeah, and the idiom is effective because a rut is a fixed, narrow groove worn into the ground by repetitive movement, like a cartwheel.
Right.
When you say you are stuck in a rut, you convey that feeling of being trapped in a predictable, repetitive routine that lacks momentum or freshness. It's operational fatigue.
The loss of velocity and direction, communicated visually and instantly. It effectively communicates a kind of operational paralysis without having to blame external management or specific tasks.
Precisely.
Okay, let's look at uneasy anticipation, that nervous, stretched, wait for crucial news. The sources introduced the perfect idiom for this, being on tenterhooks.
This is a favorite of mine because the etymology is so rich. Tenterhooks were historically hooks used to stretch newly woven cloth taut on a wooden frame. So when you say you were on tenterhooks, you mean you were figuratively stretched, tight and tense, in a state of uneasy suspense while waiting for a critical, uncertain outcome.
You're communicating that the passage of time itself is agonizing. You're not just waiting. You're actively experiencing tension because the outcome is critical and uncertain.
It's a powerful way to convey high-level anxiety that's tied to a specific impending event.
It's highly descriptive.
It communicates that every nerve ending is pulled tight, awaiting the snap or release of the news.
Finally, let's address the mixed bag, that complex emotion that arises when something genuinely positive concludes. The precise adjective for this experience is bittersweet.
Bittersweet perfectly captures the simultaneous presence of positive completion and negative closure. Think of a successful project ending.
A retirement party or a child leaving for college?
Exactly. The positive is the achievement or the memory. The negative is the conclusion, the loss of that shared routine, or the end of the journey.
It's an essential word for transitional moments, and it demonstrates a reflective maturity that honors both the joy of achievement and the quiet grief of closure.
It recognizes that emotional payoffs are rarely pure. They're almost always a complex mixture of gain and loss.
And these specialized terms on tenterhooks, bittersweet, are the verbal tools that differentiate a basic reporter of feelings from, an artist who can articulate the human condition with precision.
Well said.
This section is paramount, I think, for our professional listeners. When you feel mistreated, ignored, or disrespected in a professional setting, the need for precision is at its absolute highest. You have to address the situation without triggering defensiveness, ensuring resolution, not further conflict.
The ability to articulate emotional injury or perceived disrespect without resorting to accusation is a fundamental hallmark of professional maturity and, frankly, future leadership potential.
And the core goal?
The core goal, as always, is to describe your feeling personally, maintaining professional ground without attacking the other person's intent.
And the foundational strategy for this, as stressed by all our sources, is the rigorous use of I statements.
So crucial. By phrasing your feelings personally, I felt, rather than making accusations, you did.
Yeah.
You keep the focus on your own experience.
And that makes the statement undeniable, right? It's impossible to argue with how you felt.
It is. And it's significantly less likely to trigger a defensive retaliatory reaction. It maintains professional distance and control over the narrative.
Okay, so let's tackle the diplomatic challenge of feeling ignored or excluded. If you feel like your input wasn't valued in a crucial discussion, you need a term that describes that feeling without being overly dramatic.
Right.
The sources suggest I felt sidelined during that meeting.
Sidelined is highly effective because it employs a universally recognized sports metaphor. It implies removal from the main action or the core decision-making process.
So the power of this word is that it doesn't accuse the manager of malice.
No, it just describes the objective effect. I was put on the side, watching the game happen without me.
That clearly communicates exclusion without using inflammatory language, but is sidelined too weak sometimes. What if the exclusion felt like active marginalization?
That is an excellent point. Sidelined works best when you're addressing a temporary, single-instance exclusion, implying the decision was simply made without you. If the pattern is persistent and systemic, you might move toward a stronger term, like marginalized.
But you have to be prepared to back that up.
You must be prepared to back that up with data showing a pattern of systematic exclusion. Sidelined, however, is a great starting point for diplomatic conversation.
What are some other ways to articulate that feeling of invisibility?
The sources offer, I felt like my contributions were invisible. This addresses the effort expended. You're essentially saying, I put in the work, but the result of that work was not seen, acknowledged, or factored into the decision.
That could be a really potent statement when you're advocating for recognition or for more resources.
Yep.
And then there's that feeling of frustration when your points are continually blocked, which some people internally feel as talking to a brick wall.
While this perfectly captures the internal frustration, implying the other party is rigid, unresponsive, impenetrable, the sources universally caution against deploying this specific phrase to the colleague or superior.
It crosses a line.
It crosses the line from articulating your feeling into outright accusation of their ineptitude. It is excellent for internal validation, but tactically dangerous in a professional confrontation.
Okay, let's move on to feeling undercut. This often happens when a decision that was supposed to be yours is made behind your back, or your authority is subtly eroded. The precise term the sources provide is undermined.
Undermined is a term of immense power in organizational dynamics. Its mechanical meaning suggests that someone is actively weakening your position, your reputation, your authority, like digging away at the foundational support beneath you.
It communicates structural disrespect. Can you give us a concrete scenario?
Sure. Imagine you spent weeks negotiating a budget ceiling with a client, only to have your manager swoop in and unilaterally agree to a lower number with that client without telling you.
Oof.
You have been explicitly undermined. Your manager has compromised your authority and your future bargaining power.
So when you use the word undermined, you're signaling that the infraction isn't just emotional, it's a breach in operational protocol and hierarchy that has damaged your professional standing.
Yes. It conveys a sense of active sabotage, even if it was unintentional, that a simple word like disrespected just doesn't capture. It's essential for defining boundaries of authority and making sure the receiving party understands the severity of the damage.
Using this term ensures the feedback is taken seriously. You're addressing a structural issue, not just expressing subjective hurt.
That's the key.
Next, the universally frustrating experience of having known information explained to you, often condescendingly. It's sometimes called mansplaining, but in a gender-neutral professional context, the sources provide the precise term, being patronized.
Or the softer, more digestible expression, I felt a little talked down to.
Right, so to be patronized means someone is treating you as if you are inferior, often by explaining things you already understand, implicitly asserting their intellectual superiority.
And what makes I felt a little talked down to so effective is its subtlety. It addresses the negative power dynamic directly but politely, focusing on the effect of their manner, not their presumed character flaw.
You are signaling, I recognize the implicit power differential you're trying to enforce, and I am rejecting that attempt through calm, precise articulation.
It names the behavior without raising the conflict level to an aggressive confrontation.
And it redirects the dynamic back to a level playing field, focusing on professional parity, which is the ultimate goal in these interactions.
Exactly.
Finally, we have to discuss the most serious infraction in interpersonal dynamics, the truly toxic behavior known as gaslighting, where someone actively manipulates reality to make you question your own memory or judgment.
This is where maintaining clinical and professional language is absolutely paramount. The gaslighter's primary weapon is emotional chaos and shifting goalposts. If you engage emotionally, you lose.
So how do you maintain professional ground while addressing that feeling of your reality being attacked?
The sources strongly recommend sticking to objective, verifiable facts and the use of clinical terms. Do not accuse them of gaslighting immediately, as that is highly inflammatory and often derails the conversation.
So what do you say instead?
Instead, you focus on the effect of their behavior using the terms. I feel like my concerns are being dismissed, or the most precise term, I felt invalidated.
Why is invalidated so critical here?
Invalidated means your experience, your perspective, and your legitimate feelings are being treated as non-existent or untrue. By stating, I felt invalidated when we reviewed the meeting minutes and you stated I hadn't raised that point even though I have it documented here, you remove the emotional charge.
And you focus solely on the observable behavior and its effect on you? That is the necessary tactical step. But if they push back and say, I didn't invalidate you, you're being too sensitive, what should the listener's prepared response be?
The source material suggests, A disciplined refocusing on the data, moving the conversation away from emotional interpretation. You should state, regardless of the intent behind your words, the effect was that my factual contribution was ignored. Let's return to the data point of X that I raised last week. We need to integrate that.
So that strategy ensures you remain professionally grounded, tethered to facts, and you refuse to engage in the emotional battle the gaslighter is trying to create.
You assert your reality through evidence, not through feelings. #tag outro.
We have covered a vast range of emotional articulation today, really demonstrating the necessity of moving far beyond the simple, I'm fine. We've explored the internal tensions signaled by feeling conflicted.
The physical reality of being bowled over and the professional injury of being undermined.
The synthesis is clear. Authentic, high-level communication relies entirely on connecting through nuance.
We learned how to describe stress not merely as a state, but as a kinetic, external experience, being harried or, more direly, drowning in deadlines.
Right. And we learned how to communicate profound loss by saying we are crestfallen because we had truly set our heart on the outcome.
And most critically, we armed ourselves with tactical vocabulary for the trickiest situations, like asserting professional boundaries by using terms like sidelined, or asserting our reality against toxic behavior by explaining that we felt invalidated.
The key takeaway for you, the listener, is this. Do not settle for the easy word. The gap between saying, I'm stressed and I feel like I'm juggling a million things at once is the gap between being dismissed and being truly understood.
Dig deeper. Use metaphors, use physical sensations, and use precise adjectives to truly communicate the complexity of your internal world. This is how you gain influence, establish clear boundaries, and forge deeper connections.
Use that expanded vocabulary to not only understand your experiences better, but to define them clearly to the world.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. If the goal is truly connecting with the person you are speaking to, which of these nuanced words, from feeling harried to being on tenterhooks to feeling undermined, would be the single most essential tool for you to keep ready and deploy strategically for a high-stakes conversation today?
That's it for this deep dive. We look forward to witnessing the complexity you articulate next time.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we take a whole stack of source material and turn it into something you can really use. High-grade, applicable knowledge.
That's the goal.
And today, we are moving way beyond the surface. Our mission is, well, it's simple, but it's also pretty challenging. We're here to elevate your emotional lexicon.
Right. We're moving past the basic stuff.
Exactly. We're going beyond just, happy, sad, excited. We want to get into the really complex, nuanced states that define those high-stakes interactions.
Right.
In your career, in leadership, everywhere.
And this is really for the listener who's already curious, who wants that precision in their thought and speech. This deep dive is kind of a linguistic shortcut.
A shortcut. I like that.
Yeah, we're not just making a vocabulary list. We're accessing advanced psychological concepts, social descriptors, things that unlock real nuance. Our source material is really rich, focusing on these terms that add texture, high-definition detail.
And the analysis we've pulled from, it really hones in on advanced English vocabulary. We're talking C2 level concepts that honestly, they can trip up even native speakers.
Oh, for sure.
Because they describe these mixed or subtle emotional states.
Yeah.
Complex positivity, weird social dynamics, those internal feelings that if you mislabel them, it can really derail a decision.
Exactly. And that's where we want to dig in, the crucial distinctions. We need to know the precise difference between, say, feeling something right in front of you versus just anticipating a threat down the road.
Okay.
Or the difference between seeing pros and cons versus, simply not caring at all. It's intensely practical. It's about defining the atmosphere in a boardroom versus the specific feeling in your chest as you walk into it.
I think a good way to think about it is this. Most of the time, our communication about emotions is like a black and white sketch. You get the basic shape, you understand the mood, anger, joy, whatever, but that precision, that ability to articulate the subtle shading and the depth, that's what turns the sketch into a high-definition color photograph.
And that's the goal here.
That's what we're aiming for by the end of this.
Because that precise articulation, it leads directly to better self-management and, dramatically improved social navigation. If you can define a complex feeling accurately,
you can control it.
You can control it, manage it, or even leverage it, especially in those high-stakes environments.
Okay, let's unpack this. And let's start where we probably always should, with the complexities of positive experience, how we process success, not just for us, but when it happens to people around us.
Right.
We'll start with a really beautiful concept. The idea that joy isn't. It's not always just ours. So much of our success, professional or personal, is tied up with our team, our family.
Mentees, yeah.
Exactly. But how do you articulate that feeling? That immense surge of pride and, that deep satisfaction you feel when someone else hits a major milestone. Say your business partner finally lands that huge contract they've fought for years.
That emotional transfer, that's precisely where the concept of a vicarious emotion becomes so essential. It's an adjective that just completely reframes where the feeling is coming from.
Vicarious. It's a powerful word. So if I'm feeling a genuine thrill, but I wasn't the one who closed the deal, how does the word actually define that mechanism?
Well, the core definition of living vicariously is experiencing something through the feelings, actions, or even the imagination of another person. The source material really emphasizes this. It's much deeper than just saying, I'm happy for them.
Right, it's more than that.
It's a profound shared resonance. It's a vicarious thrill, a vicarious victory. You are literally absorbing the emotional payoff, almost as if it happened to you directly.
What's so fascinating about that is just how efficient the emotional reward is. You get to share in this monumental triumph, but you didn't have to go through the 10 years of sleepless nights.
And all the tough negotiations.
But you just get the good part. It's a genuine emotional transfer, but it seems like it requires a really high level of empathy, of projection.
It does. And the analytical depth here is important. When you use the word vicarious, you're acknowledging a specific kind of social contract. You're signaling that your emotional investment in that person or that team is so strong that their win actually registers as a piece of your own.
It's more than just polite congratulations.
Way more. It labels a true shared emotional alliance. And that's a powerful descriptor for shared investment and success, which is just crucial in any collaborative environment.
I think we sometimes forget the other side of that, though, the flip side of a vicarious experience. If you can't feel that vicarious surge of joy when a colleague wins.
That says something too.
It says a lot. It often reveals some underlying tension, right? Maybe jealousy or a really deep competitive rivalry.
Yeah.
So just using the word vicarious itself signals a kind of emotional health, the ability to celebrate a win that isn't yours.
Exactly. The absence of a vicarious feeling is just as informative as its presence. For leaders, fostering an environment where vicarious success is genuine, where people truly feel that shared investment, that is critical for team cohesion.
Absolutely.
If your whole team can feel a vicarious thrill when one division hits a target, you've got a powerhouse organizational culture right there.
So the key takeaway here is that when you use this term, you're showing a pretty sophisticated understanding of emotional projection and social connection. It communicates very quickly that you see yourself as part of a bigger ecosystem of success.
Right. So now let's take that huge success and pivot. Pivot sharply to the moment it lands squarely on your shoulders. What happens when the success is undeniably yours? The promotion is yours, the book is published, the funding came through.
But the feeling isn't pride.
But the feeling that follows is not pride, but this crushing internal sense of inadequacy.
Ah, the shadow. We've all felt that whisper of doubt, I'm sure, especially when you've had a quick rise or you've achieved something that felt just a little bit beyond your grasp.
The evidence is screaming success.
But the voice in your head is just relentlessly whispering, you are a fake.
That is the classic definition of imposter syndrome, and our sources highlight this. This isn't a casual phrase. It's a profound psychological concept. It's been rigorously studied, and it comes up constantly in discussions of high-level professional contexts.
Especially among high achievers, which is the irony.
That is the great irony.
It's really important to anchor this concept, though. Where did the term actually come from? What was the initial finding?
It was first identified by two clinical psychologists, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, back in 1978. Their original research focused specifically on high-achieving women who, despite all the subjective evidence of their competence,
They just didn't believe it.
they held this persistent belief that they were intellectual frauds, that their successes were just due to luck, or that they'd somehow tricked people.
That context is so important. It shows this isn't just a lack of confidence. It's a real cognitive dissonance between the objective success and your subjective feeling. It's that specific feeling that you're going to be found out.
Right. Even with a mountain of evidence stacked against that belief.
So when you use the term imposter syndrome, you instantly convey the gravity and the complexity of that specific internal conflict. You're not just saying, I feel nervous about my new job.
No, you're diagnosing a complex internal state. You're saying something like, despite the incredible success of the Q3 numbers, I couldn't shake this persistent sense of imposter syndrome as I was getting the presentation ready.
And the power of having that label, as we were saying earlier, is huge. Before we had this term, those feelings were often just internalized as, a personal failure or actual incompetence.
You thought you were the only one.
Exactly. Now, by using this specific label, we can talk about it as a recognized, common, and most importantly, a manageable psychological phenomenon. It normalizes that sense of fraudulence that so often comes with big success.
And for you listening, recognizing this in other people is a powerful leadership tool. If you see a high performer on your team who's stalling or even self-sabotaging, understanding they might be battling imposter syndrome lets you address the root psychological issue.
Instead of just criticizing the performance.
Exactly. You're not just looking at the symptom.
Let me just challenge this a little bit, though. Is there ever a scenario where a small dose of this feeling is actually useful? Does it maybe protect you from becoming arrogant, from hubris?
That's a fascinating question. Some analyses do suggest that a mild, a transient form of that doubt, what we might call healthy anxiety, it does keep high achievers motivated. It prevents complacency. But true imposter syndrome is defined by its crippling, persistent nature. It moves beyond motivation and into emotional paralysis. And that's what we want to avoid. If it stops you from accepting a new opportunity, it's crossed the line from being protective to being a destructive psychological barrier.
And when that paralysis kicks in, when the imposter syndrome really takes hold, the feeling often moves beyond just the mental. It becomes this physical sensation of being completely overwhelmed. You feel physically unable to cope with the demands of the situation you've just been put in.
That internal state of functional paralysis, where the external demands just feel like they exceed your perceived capacity, that is perfectly captured by the idiom, out of your depth.
It's a beautifully simple metaphor, really accessible, and it works everywhere. But let's focus on the implications of using this phrase in a high-stakes environment.
Absolutely. The implication is critical. Saying, I feel completely out of my depth on this merger negotiation is so much more articulate than just saying, I can't handle this.
Why is that?
Because it uses the water metaphor to vividly describe a struggle against overwhelming external forces rather than just labeling an internal weakness. It implies there's a quantifiable gap between the challenge and your current resources.
So it's a crisis of scale, not a crisis of character. And that's strategically very useful. If a leader admits, I feel out of my depth on this regulatory filing, they're not resigning.
No, not at all.
They're signaling that they need specialized resources or support to keep from, drowning. It's a mature way to ask for help.
Precisely. It describes the specific paralysis that often goes along with imposter syndrome. The two concepts feed on each other because you're battling the internal feeling that you're a fraud.
Every real task feels bigger.
Every objective task feels exponentially larger and more difficult, pushing you further out of your depth. Articulating that link imposter syndrome leading to feeling out of your depth. That's incredibly precise communication.
And just think about the different response you'd get. If you tell a manager, I can't do this, you might just get frustration. But if you say, I am feeling increasingly out of my depth because this specific part of the project requires expertise in X, which I don't have, you're inviting a strategic solution. Hiring help, getting training, reallocating the task. It's a constructive statement of need, all packaged in this vivid language.
It gives language to that moment of functional panic in a high-stakes environment. And this is the texture we promised at the start. So moving from the complexity of self-evaluation, let's shift our focus to how we evaluate the environment around us, the unspoken social dynamics.
Social articulation.
Yeah.
It often requires us to describe these invisible forces. We need words for that ambient energy, that vibe, that sense of history or conflict just hanging in the air.
That external, unstated emotional pressure, it requires a word with some real weight.
Okay, imagine this. You walk into a high-stakes meeting 10 minutes late, the room is dead silent, notebooks are closed, everyone's sitting ramrod straight.
Yeah.
Instantly, that something dramatic just happened.
A major decision, a conflict, a resignation.
Exactly, that lingering tension.
Yeah.
That's what we need to name.
And that is when the tension becomes palpable.
Palpable. It's the perfect C2 level adjective because it instantly elevates the description. It goes from just tense to intensely, unavoidably present.
And the etymology here is really the core strength of the word. It traces back to the Latin verb palpare, which means to stroke or touch.
To touch. So it's not just a mental state.
No, it suggests the atmosphere is so heavy, so dense, or so intense you can almost physically touch it. The emotional density has figuratively taken on a physical quality.
It turns an intangible feeling into a tangible force. When you say the tension was palpable after the CEO announced the restructuring, you're declaring that the emotional state of that room was undeniable, inescapable, almost tactile.
It's a highly sophisticated descriptor for extreme environmental stress.
It is.
And the utility of this term, it extends beyond conflict, too. Think about anticipation. The tension before a major announcement, say, the moment before an election result is called.
Or right before a big performance begins.
Exactly. That anticipation can also be palpable. It's the density of a collective shared emotion.
I think we can even deepen this analysis by thinking about the social consequence of failing to acknowledge a palpable atmosphere. A leader who walks into a room and just ignores palpable tension is going to lose credibility instantly.
Oh, immediately.
The ability to identify, name, and then address the palpable tension is a defining trait of effective social leadership.
It absolutely is, and it often relies on reading nonverbal cues. Palpable tension shows up in frozen body language, delayed responses, silence.
All the little things.
And you, the discerning observer, you read those cues and you articulate the state of the entire system with that single powerful word.
Palpable. Okay, so if the room is palpable with tension or anticipation, what's the immediate internal state that kicks in for the person walking in? That churning unease, that fearful expectation before a difficult moment.
That would be apprehension.
And this is where we need to spend some real time, because a lot of people just default to simpler words like anxiety or scared, and they miss the strategic utility of using apprehension. We need to be precise about how this is different from simple fear.
The distinction is vital. Simple fear, or being scared, is typically an instant, acute reaction to immediate present danger. The fire alarm goes off, you feel scared. It's biological, it's reactive.
Okay.
Apprehension, on the other hand, is rooted entirely in the future. It's a calculated, fearful expectation, an uneasy anticipation of something bad that might happen. It's not paralysis, it's an emotional forecast.
So if a team member is late for a call, you might feel a spike of fear for their safety.
Yeah.
But if you're waiting for the quarterly performance review where you know budget cuts are on the table, that is apprehension.
That's it. You're nervous about what is going to happen based on prior knowledge and a realistic forecast.
Okay.
In fact, the root of the word comes from the Latin apprehender, meaning to grasp or seize. In this emotional context, it means your mind is grasping a difficult or negative outcome before it even materializes. It's a sophisticated way to express hesitation and calculated worry.
And the strategic application of that is huge. If you say, I am apprehensive about pitching this new product because the market feedback suggested high initial resistance, you're communicating foresight, preparation, realistic expectation management.
You're not paralyzed, you're mentally armored.
That's a great way to put it.
And apprehension doesn't imply helplessness. If you're scared, you might run. If you're apprehensive, you might spend the whole night refining your counter-arguments. It signals a high level of emotional intelligence and proactive planning. It makes your internal communication incredibly precise.
But let me ask you this. Is there a danger that using this word could sound a little timid? A well-read audience needs to know how to use it without sounding like they're just making excuses for not acting.
That's a valid point. The key is context and coupling. If you just say, I am apprehensive and stop there, yeah, it might sound timid.
Right.
But if you couple it with the preparation, I am apprehensive about the board meeting, but I've triple-checked the data and prepared 3 alternative scenarios, then the apprehension is reframed as prudence. It signals realism, not weakness. It implies a rational calculation of risk, which is a leadership strength.
So apprehension is the emotional state of a good risk manager.
Precisely. It's an effective word for professional self-description because it communicates that you've considered the variables and you're proceeding with caution, informed by potential negative outcomes.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time in these negative spaces, the palpable tension, the personal apprehension. Let's shift gears dramatically to the ideal social connection. What happens when you walk into a situation and instead of tension, there's just immediate, harmonious understanding, a seamless flow?
That essential social ideal, it has both a formal and an informal label, and both are equally valuable. The formal term for the state of harmonious understanding is rapport.
Rapport. It's the foundation of all effective negotiation, mentorship, collaboration. It's that instant feeling of being perfectly aligned. Sometimes you're even finishing each other's sentences. And it doesn't matter if you just met or you've known each other for years.
It implies mutual trust and a sympathetic relationship that's built almost immediately. Sociologically, we see this achieved through things like mirroring body language, sharing of vulnerability, or finding some common ground that just accelerates the trust-building process.
It's the social shortcut we all want.
It is.
And the informal term that captures that quick connection, the sense of skipping all the awkward stages, is to hit it off.
Exactly, to hit it off immediately. Both terms describe the successful establishment of trust and understanding, just bypassing all that usual hesitation.
So think about the professional application. Establishing instant rapport with a high-value client or a new team member, it just accelerates the rate at which you can get to the core tasks. It means a promising start because the friction points have been instantly minimized.
Right. Now let's connect this back. This is where we see the value of having this entire vocabulary stack. How does achieving rapport dynamically influence our earlier concepts like apprehension and palpable tension?
This is a crucial synthesis.
It is. As the source material implicitly suggests, if you have strong rapport with your team, the difficult conversations, the ones that would normally create palpable tension, can be approached much more directly.
Because the trust is there.
Because the foundation of trust is secure. The conflict can be contained to the issue, not the relationship.
So good rapport is the ultimate. It's the ultimate mitigator for apprehension. If I know I have strong rapport with my manager, I'm way less apprehensive about bringing up bad news about a project delay. I trust that the relationship can handle it.
Precisely. You've replaced fearful anticipation with confident reliance. The ability to articulate these social dynamics, using words like palpable and rapport, is the first step toward controlling them and getting positive outcomes. But what happens when that control breaks down internally and your own feelings are at war with each other?
This is often the trickiest emotional state to capture, especially in a professional setting. It's not confusion, it's not anger, it's not sadness. It's that experience of holding two strong, opposing feelings at the exact same time, and neither one wins. You see the pros and the cons in this perfect, stubborn balance.
We are talking about the state of being ambivalent.
And we absolutely must emphasize the critical distinction here. This word is constantly misused. People use it when they mean indifferent.
All the time.
And that separation is essential for our C2 level communicators.
It's a fundamental perks of knowledge. Indifferent means you genuinely don't care at all. You lack interest, sympathy, concern. The outcome literally means nothing to you. You have no investment.
Whereas ambivalent, that's a state of deep conflicting care.
Exactly.
It implies you have two opposing, often really strong feelings at the same time. The desire to move forward is perfectly matched by the desire to hold back. You're invested, but you're torn.
Let's use a strategic example. Imagine a startup is deciding whether to accept a major acquisition offer. If the board is indifferent, they shouldn't even be in the room. They don't care if the company sells or survives.
Right.
But if the board is ambivalent, it means they are passionately weighing the huge cash payout. That's the pro against the loss of the company's long-term mission and autonomy. That's the con. Both feelings are strong, they cancel each other out, and it leads to this internal stasis.
That distinction is monumental. One implies complex, agonizing consideration. The other implies a total lack of investment. So let me pose the challenge. If I use the term ambivalent in a high-stakes decision, doesn't that just make me sound wishy-washy, indecisive?
That's the risk, yes. But the skilled communicator uses ambivalence to signal objectivity. If you're a leader, saying, I am ambivalent about the new strategic direction, communicates that you have thoroughly considered the competing forces, the pros and cons, and you're pausing for critical reflection.
So you're not swayed by the hype or the fear.
Exactly. You're in a state of balanced analysis.
It's a word that really screams measured consideration. It lets a leader step back from the emotional momentum of a decision and look at it neutrally. It signals that they've done their due diligence on both sides of a complex argument. It's the linguistic opposite of being impulsive.
It also gives you leverage in a discussion. If you can articulate why you're ambivalent, I'm ambivalent because the cost savings are huge, but the inevitable layoffs will tank morale for years. You force everyone else to confront the complexity you're weighing.
You introduce the human cost into the financial calculation.
Using the word ambivalent to summarize that whole internal negotiation.
Okay, so we've covered the complexity of internal doubt, the tension in the room, the agony of a mixed choice. These are all really intense states. We need a word for the profound, necessary release that often follows these periods of intensity.
We move to the moment of emotional liberation, the cleansing of the system, the experience we describe as cathartic.
Cathartic. This is the feeling of releasing strong, often repressed or intense emotions, usually after a long period of internal struggle. It's not just relief, it's a necessary, powerful reset.
The source material often defines this using the ancient Greek concept catharsis, which was originally associated with tragic drama. Aristotle suggested that watching a tragedy evoked pity and fear, which then purged those same emotions from the spectator.
So it leads to an emotional equilibrium.
Fundamentally, yes, it's a cleansing of the emotional palate.
So the intensity is actually integral to the process. It's not about finding a gentle way out. It's about going through the intensity to achieve the eventual cleansing. What are some modern practical ways this happens?
The examples are really wide-ranging. The release can come from physical exertion, an intense, grinding workout that just flushes stress out of your system. It can be intellectual or interpersonal, finally having that incredibly difficult, honest conversation with a partner or colleague that clears the air.
Or, as you mentioned, it can be artistic, spending an hour just writing down every single frustration you have, and then shredding the paper. That process itself is often described as cathartic.
Because it externalized the internal chaos.
Exactly.
The key implication of the word is that the experience was not just difficult, but profoundly necessary. And healing. If you're describing a grueling project that took months, and you say, the negotiation process was exhausting, but the final handshake felt absolutely cathartic, you're communicating that the struggle was worthwhile.
Because it resulted in a genuine positive internal shift. And closure.
It suggests the emotional burden has been lifted and you're starting from a clean slate. It implies a moving forward, where the intensity of the negative experience was actually the required precursor to emotional healing. If you can label that post-resolution state with such precision, you demonstrate a complete understanding of emotional processing.
The ability to articulate the resolution is just as important as articulating the conflict. We need to know where we're going, and cathartic is the destination after enduring the states of apprehension and ambivalence. This entire deep dive has really been about understanding that distance, hasn't it? From the initial trigger to the final resolution.
That's right.
This has been an intensive exploration of emotional architecture. We've hopefully given you the vocabulary to move beyond that sketch and into a high-definition analysis of your world. Let's quickly synthesize these concepts.
Let's do it. We started on a high note with the power of shared success, that positive emotional projection we feel when others triumph. We labeled that vicarious joy.
And we saw how that reinforces social bonds. But success often brings its own shadow, that internal disconnect we named imposter syndrome, which then manifests in that feeling of being completely out of your depth.
We then turned outward to the environment, learning to precisely describe that intense, heavy social energy as palpable tension, noting its almost physical, undeniable quality.
And when faced with that palpable tension, the rational mind defaults to apprehension, the calculated, fearful expectation of the future, which is so different from immediate fear. It's the state of a prepared risk manager.
We contrasted those negative states with the social ideal, that immediate, harmonious understanding we call rapport, which lets two people just bypass hesitation and instantly hit it off.
Internally, we address the agony of balanced choice, the state of being ambivalent, which implies complex, equal consideration of pros and cons, differentiating it completely from simple indifference.
And finally, we identified the essential vocabulary for that release and healing, the cathartic experience, that profound cleansing of the emotional burden that follows an intense period of struggle.
What stands out to me is how efficiently these words don't just describe a feeling. They package an entire psychological event or social dynamic into a single term. They really do move your communication from simple to complex.
They add a crucial texture to your speech. They demonstrate a mastery of nuance that is just essential for self-management and social leadership. You're not just conveying information, you're conveying the precise shade, intensity, and origin of that information.
We hope this deep dive provides you with the high-definition color you need to articulate both your internal state and the complex social dynamics around you.
And as a final provocative thought for you to carry into your day, look at the terms we've covered and use them analytically. If you were to assess your current working environment, what specific social dynamic, maybe a recent team meeting or a client relationship, would you now accurately describe as palpable,
And if you can isolate and articulate that source of palpable tension with precision, ask yourself this: how would acknowledging that tension and maybe establishing better rapport help you mitigate your own apprehension about approaching it next time? The language is your tool for strategic action.
Keep practicing these nuances. Keep striving for that high-definition articulation.
Until next time, keep diving deep. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You've sent us a truly fascinating stack of sources this time.
I really are.
And our mission, it feels very laser-focused. We are exploring the secret vocabulary of the thinking mind. That language that moves beyond the simple, sort of generic terms we all tend to fall back on.
That's so right, because when we try to capture what's actually happening inside our heads, that churning process of understanding or failing to understand,
right?
Remembering, reacting, we often just grab the easiest words, the broadest one.
You do. We say we're confused.
Or surprised or focused. But these blanket terms, they completely mask the incredible complexity, the beautiful nuance of those internal states.
Exactly. Because if I tell you I'm merely confused, I've missed a massive opportunity. I mean, I haven't told you how I'm confused.
Not at all.
Am I intellectually stumped by the data? Or is it more like I'm just shell-shocked because reality took a sudden left turn? And that linguistic specificity, that ability to articulate the flavor of the internal experience, that is what we are hunting for today.
It is.
We are diving deep into this category of feelings that the sources are calling cognitive emotions.
And that definition of cognitive emotions is, I think, it's the cornerstone of this whole deep dive for you, our listener.
It really is.
As it's defined in the material, these are feelings specifically tied to two major functions of the mind. First, how we process, absorb, and understand information. And second, our chronological perspective.
The time element.
Exactly. The complex emotions that come up when we look backward or, even forward in time, they're emotions of the brain rather than emotions of the heart, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. So our goal for you, the listener, is pretty simple then. We want to equip you with the advanced, precise language you need to articulate these rich internal landscapes.
It's like an upgrade.
It's totally an upgrade for your emotional toolkit. We're moving you away from the basic sort of all-purpose word and giving you a full, specialized set of instruments.
Yeah.
Things that are capable of dissecting these feelings with surgical accuracy.
Because we often stress this, don't we? True fluency and really effective communication in any context, it's not fundamentally about how quickly you can speak.
No.
It's about how precisely you can express an idea. It's about making sure the words you use truly convey the sophisticated depth of the human experience you're trying to share.
Those subtle distinctions.
Yeah, they're vital for clarity in thought, for self-awareness, and for clarity in expression.
Okay, let's unpack this source material. We have a pretty clear roadmap here structured around cognitive function.
We do.
We are starting at the bottom of the ladder.
Yeah.
Grappling with the spectrum of non-understanding and confusion.
The messy stuff.
The messy stuff.
Yeah.
Then we'll ascend into moments of clarity and deep focus.
Okay.
From there, we'll take a necessary long look, the weight of time and memory.
A really important piece.
And finally, we'll end with those high-intensity shocks that can momentarily just overload the cognitive system and leave us speechless.
I'm ready. This is going to be good.
Let's start where any good learning journey begins. Or, maybe more accurately, where it frequently gets stuck.
Confusion.
Confusion, as one of our sources pointed out, just saying I am confused it's often the broadest, least helpful linguistic choice you can make.
It really is. It's like a verbal white flag.
A verbal white flag. I love that. But it doesn't explain why you're waving it. Was the battle lost due to a lack of resources or a superior strategy or surprise attack?
You've given up, but we don't know how or why. So we need to get specific about the precise flavor of that mental blockage.
Indeed. And when we start to analyze the different gradations of non-understanding, we find this really crucial distinction.
Which is?
The one that separates a genuine intellectual challenge from, say, outright disorientation.
Ah, okay. So let's look at that first most common step on the cognitive ladder, the word perplexed.
What's so fascinating about the word perplexed is that the source material really emphasizes that it's an active state.
Right. You're not passive.
Not at all. It implies a specific kind of mental difficulty that often comes from interacting with complexity. It's not that the necessary information is missing.
No, the data is all there.
It's that the existing information is structured in this convoluted way that creates a kind of intellectual knot you can't immediately untie.
That distinction between absence of information and a convoluted structure, that's key.
It is.
When you are perplexed, your brain hasn't quit. It's actually working aggressively. It's trying to solve a puzzle or figure out a dense legal document.
Or a complex report, yeah.
Exactly. The logic, the solution, the answer, it is logically there, it's achievable, but it's just out of reach because of the intricacy.
So you're fully engaged in the complexity, you're struggling with the interlocking pieces.
Yeah.
You might need to retrace your steps or look at it from a different angle.
Absolutely. So if you say, I am perplexed by this quarter's financial statement, what are you really signaling there?
I'm signaling that I believe the data is sound, but the way it's presented, the way the lines of credit interact with the capital expenditures is just, it's too difficult for a quick grasp.
But there's an inherent hope.
There is. If I spend another hour on this, I can untangle it. The frustration is purely intellectual.
Exactly. And the source gives that classic example of trying to solve a complicated math problem. The struggle is internal, intellectual, and generally solvable with enough focused effort.
But wait, I have a question here. If I'm trying to solve a puzzle and I fail, doesn't that frustration sometimes feel just as illogical as an unexpected shock?
That's a great point.
Where is that clean line between complexity and outright disbelief?
That's a crucial challenge. I think the line lies in the source of the confusion.
The source?
Perplex implies the input is rational, but just complicated. But now, let's move past mere complexity and into the realm of the illogical or the impossible.
Okay.
And that's where the mind really starts to just give up.
Now we shift gears entirely.
Completely. If perplexed is a problem of complexity, then baffled and bewildered are problems of profound disbelief and disorientation.
The input doesn't just challenge your intellect.
No. It violates your fundamental expectations of reality.
I love the example used in the source materials for this. It's so good.
The Latin one.
Yes. Imagine if someone you know, someone you are absolutely certain only speaks English, suddenly starts addressing you in flawless, fluent, ancient Latin.
Right. I mean, the sudden switch, the impossibility of that input in that context, that's the trigger.
Precisely. You're not perplexed by the intricacies of the Latin grammar.
No, you're fundamentally baffled by the fact that this person is speaking it at all.
Right. And these words, baffled and bewildered, they suggest a seed of confusion so deep that it causes mental and sometimes even, physical disorientation.
The confusion isn't just a lack of understanding. It's a shock from input that is utterly illogical or overwhelming or completely contrary to what you know.
And bewildered. That one seems to carry a slightly stronger sense of being lost or maybe mentally unanchored.
It does. Think of the root related to wilderness. You are literally lost in your thoughts. You're losing your bearings in the face of this impossible event. The cognitive system has just taken a hit.
So the distinction is crucial for sophisticated communication.
Absolutely. Are you struggling with the structure of the information? You're perplexed? Or are you struggling with the impossibility of the situation?
Then you're baffled or bewildered.
Exactly. One is an intellectual challenge. The other is a cognitive shock. Choosing the right word immediately tells your listener about the nature of your mental struggle.
And when this mental blockage hits, regardless of the cause, we need an idiom that captures that total, painful cognitive shutdown. Our sources point directly to one of the most useful C2 idioms for this state.
I couldn't wrap my head around it.
That's the one.
It's such a strong phrase because it relies on a very potent physical metaphor for a cognitive failure.
Right.
I mean, think about the physical act. What does wrapping your hands around something mean? It means you're grasping it, you're gaining control over it.
You're enclosing it. You feel like you've mastered the object.
You've got it. You understand its form. So when you can't wrap your head around it, the metaphor translates perfectly.
The concept is too vast, too strange, too complex.
Or maybe just too counterintuitive for your mind to mentally contain, process, or enclose. It is a powerful, everyday phrase for a profound cognitive defeat.
It tells the listener that the information has violated your internal cognitive rules so much that active processing has basically just stopped.
It's the ultimate admission of defeat in an intellectual struggle.
That's why it works so well across different contexts, whether I'm talking about a bizarre theory in physics or the absurd demands of a new bureaucratic process if the information just won't fit into my existing mental models.
You can't wrap your head around it.
Exactly. It's a sophisticated yet really accessible way of saying, I have hit an intellectual wall that I cannot immediately climb.
And it lets you communicate the degree of the confusion without sounding, overly dramatic or vague.
Yeah.
It's precise, physical, and immediately understood.
Okay, let's move from the darkness of that intellectual wall to its absolute opposite.
The light.
Yes. The sudden, spectacular clearing of the mental fog. That beautiful moment when confusion just evaporates and the puzzle pieces finally click into place.
The famous light bulb moment.
The light bulb moment. It's a fantastic, casual, everyday term for that flash of insight, for sure.
It is, but if we're seeking the kind of precision our advanced listener is craving, we need to bring in the formal, potentially life-changing concept.
The epiphany.
The epiphany.
It's one of those words that just, it sounds as profound as the feeling it describes. It feels inherently important.
It is. It's defined as a sudden, profound realization, and to really get its weight, you can look at its roots. It originally had these religious, almost mystical connotations.
Like a divine manifestation.
Exactly, a divine realization. And in a literary or formal setting today, that sense of overwhelming transformative importance, it remains.
So an epiphany implies a major shift in perspective, a fundamental unveiling of truth.
Yes. It's not just, that's where I left my car keys.
Right, that's not an epiphany, that's just retrieving information. An epiphany is realizing why you always lose your keys.
Yes. It's the fundamental understanding of a deeply ingrained cognitive habit. It rearranges your entire cognitive structure on that subject.
The scale absolutely matters. The linguistic choice depends entirely on the impact of the realization.
So if the realization fundamentally changes your path, your beliefs, or your understanding of a complex human truth, you've had an epiphany.
But if it just provided a solution to a daily irritant or a small technical problem,
then light bulb moment is the appropriate casual contrast.
Again, the power of the epiphany is that it's often accompanied by this rush of positive emotion.
Right.
A sudden sense of intellectual liberation after the struggle of being perplexed or bewildered.
It's the reward.
It is. It's the reward for all that cognitive effort we were just talking about.
Exactly. The feeling isn't just satisfaction, it's revelation. And that leads us beautifully into the active cognitive state that often precedes, or sometimes follows, an epiphany.
Deep attention.
Deep attention, the state of focus.
And in our modern age of, infinite digital distractions, achieving true, sustained focus is not just a skill. It feels like a genuine feat.
It really is a cognitive luxury, isn't it?
It is.
Our sources identify the perfect words for this positive, sustained, and highly productive state of attention, engrossed or absorbed.
When you are engrossed in something, be it a complex report, research for a new project, or even just a deeply moving book, you're paying attention so deeply that the external world genuinely fades away.
Your brain enters what some psychologists call a flow state.
Right. And the single best indicator of being truly engrossed is losing track of time.
That is the defining feature. The illustrative example the source provides is outstanding because it connects the cognitive state to the immediate physical consequence.
Which one was that?
I was so engrossed in the report that I missed my train.
That's perfect. It perfectly captures the intensity of the focus. It was so powerful, it overrode practical awareness of the environment and chronology.
You just cease to track linear time.
The attention is positive, active, and productive. However, this level of sustained intensity naturally brings us to a crucial semantic distinction.
A very important one.
One that our listener must grasp immediately because English is tricky here. The state of being engrossed is often mistakenly conflated with the state of being obsessed.
This semantic nuance is absolutely critical. While both words imply intense focus and maybe a level of tunnel vision, the word obsessed carries a strong, almost universally negative and compulsive connotation. Engrossed is fundamentally positive or neutral.
So why is that? What's the cognitive and emotional difference in the framing?
Engrossed describes a positive or neutral state of attention. It's usually driven by curiosity or enjoyment or productive necessity.
And you're in control.
Crucially, the individual maintains an element of control and perspective. It's temporary, and it generally leads to productive outcomes.
Whereas obsessed.
Obsessed, however, implies a fixation that is often involuntary, unhealthy, and potentially destructive to the individual's well-being or relationships.
It's compulsive.
It suggests the focus has become compulsive, overriding good judgment, and actively harming other necessary areas of life.
So if I'm engrossed in a hobby, like painting miniatures, I get pleasure and satisfaction from it, and I can choose to put the brush down when my family needs me.
Exactly.
But if I'm obsessed with that hobby, I might neglect work, skip meals, and become volatile if someone interrupts me.
That is the perfect delineation. The difference is that element of destructive compulsion and loss of control.
The focus in engrossed is freely given and productive.
And the focus in obsessed is compelled and often counterproductive to your overall well-being.
Right.
And we want you, the listener, to be engrossed in your learning, finding joy and productivity in the process, but never obsessed with, tangential, harmful details at the expense of the main goal.
This level of linguistic specificity helps you convey not just how much attention you're paying, but the quality, the control, and the health of that attention.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How a single adjective choice can carry such a heavy weight of moral and psychological implication.
Our cognitive emotions aren't just about how we process information in the present moment, are they?
No, not at all.
They're deeply tied to how we perceive time, especially when we reflect on the past. This is where language really earns its keep, I think, articulating those subtle, layered feelings that general vocabulary it fails to capture.
We're moving from internal processes to internal memory.
Exactly. And we start with nostalgia, which is the general sort of catch-all concept of longing for the past.
But nostalgia can be too broad, can it? It can feel like a generic descriptor for everything from a fond memory of a childhood toy to a deep ache for a lost era.
So we need the adjective that defines a specific, complex, emotional blend within that longing.
And that perfect word, according to the sources, is wistful.
Wistful.
Wistful is. It's perhaps one of the most beautiful and useful words in this entire deep dive.
I think so, too.
It defines a gentle, slightly sad longing for the past. What's critical for the learner to understand is that it's a complex, mixed state. It is not pure happiness.
No.
Nor is it the heavy sadness of clinical depression. It's melancholy interwoven with appreciation.
I think of it as a sweet pain. Or maybe a knowing sadness.
A knowing sadness, I like that.
The source material provides that excellent illustrative detail. Looking at an old photo of a holiday and smiling, but with a heavy heart.
A heavy heart, yes.
Because that specific time, those people, that precise combination of joy and circumstance, it can never be recreated.
That image of the heavy heart is vital. When you feel wistful, you are acknowledging the beauty and joy of the memory, but at the same time, you're feeling the profound ache of temporal loss.
The fact that time is irrevocably gone.
Yes. It's a very specific, very dignified blend of melancholy and appreciation. It requires a certain maturity to feel, I think. You have to be able to appreciate the positive while accepting the impossibility of return.
And if a narrator says, "She gave a wistful smile," that paints a fully formed, layered psychological picture in the listener's mind in an instant.
It does.
You immediately understand that the person is reflecting on something beautiful but unattainable. The power of that single adjective saves 5 sentences of flat exposition.
And if we contrast that with just saying she was happy or even she felt nostalgic, we just miss the profound tension between joy and sadness.
Right.
Wistful tells us the sadness is rooted in a precious receding memory. It dictates the source and nature of the emotion.
Now, when we look back at the past, our minds have this deep-seated tendency to manipulate the data, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
To selectively curate the memories to protect ourselves or enhance the story. And this brings us to a crucial warning about the filter we often apply to memory.
Yes, the critical perspective on biased memory. This is where that essential C2 idiom comes in for advanced communication.
Viewing the past through rose-tinted glasses.
Exactly. We all know the phrase, but let's really analyze the cognitive behavior it describes. Why rose-tinted? Why that specific color?
Because the tint makes everything look softer, warmer, and prettier than the often harsh reality.
Precisely. To see things through rose-tinted glasses means to selectively remember only the good parts, the pleasant smells, the funny moments, the successes.
While conveniently ignoring the bad, painful, or inconvenient aspects.
Like the petty arguments, the stress, the failures, it creates a fundamentally biased, purified form of nostalgia.
It's interesting to consider whether that is purely self-deception or if it's some kind of psychological survival mechanism.
That's a whole other deep dive.
It is. But linguistically, when you use this phrase, you're signaling to your listener that you are aware your reflection might be flawed.
You're performing an act of critical self-awareness about your own memory bias.
It's an indispensable tool for critical thinking and honest self-reporting.
When we examine our sources, our life stories, or the historical narrative, we must always question, are we seeing this moment clearly, warts and all?
Or are the lenses tinted by comfortable omission?
Yes. Which brings us perfectly to the intellectual opposite of that selective memory.
The absolute painful clarity of realization once the moment is past.
The retrospective clarity that always accompanies the realization of past mistakes.
And the classic phrase that captures this specific cognitive realization is,
hindsight is 20/20.
Let's truly break down that analogy for maximum impact. What does 20/20 vision mean in this context?
Well, 20/20 vision is the standard for perfect, unblemished visual acuity.
Everything is crystal clear.
Sharp and perfectly defined. The phrase, therefore, clarifies that this perfect, unblemished understanding is achieved only after the event has concluded.
It emphasizes the tragic temporal element of this cognitive realization.
The clarity is guaranteed, but it arrives far too late to influence the decision itself.
It's a beautifully concise yet fatalistic phrase, isn't it? It acknowledges that while the answers, the correct decisions, the warning signs, they're all utterly obvious now.
But they were necessarily obscured, murky, or impossible to prioritize when the decision actually needed to be made.
It's an acceptance of human fallibility conditioned by the linearity of time.
And that realization of past fallibility often leads to regret.
That's the simple general feeling, of course.
But if we want to elevate our description beyond the general sadness of having made a mistake, we should use the more powerful, more literary alternative from the sources.
Which is rueful.
Rueful. To rue something, we're told, is to bitterly regret it. It's deeper than surface-level regret. It implies true sorrow, maybe even bitterness, over a past error or failure.
That bitterness is certainly the core meaning, but what makes rueful so uniquely useful as an adjective is how it's often paired with an action that indicates a processing of that bitterness.
You're talking about the rueful smile.
That's the essential image. A smile that acknowledges failure, perhaps a massive blunder, but it's delivered with a touch of humor or acceptance.
And that touch of dark humor or acceptance is what fundamentally separates it from pure, crippling, non-productive regret.
So a rueful person is admitting, yes, I was the cause of that catastrophe, or I completely messed that opportunity up.
But they're acknowledging the mistake with a degree of self-awareness, resignation, and a capacity for moving on. It demonstrates a complex mix of sadness, accountability, and slight self-deprecation.
It shows that the person has engaged in the mature cognitive reflection necessary to process the failure.
They've learned from it, and they're capable of acknowledging it openly without being emotionally paralyzed.
So rueful isn't just regret.
It's process regret.
It adds incredible depth to a character or a self-description. Are you merely sad about a mistake, or are you accepting the painful clarity of hindsight with a rueful nod?
Signaling your internal understanding of why the failure occurred. That's a huge difference.
We've spent most of our time exploring the spectrum from, quiet confusion to quiet reflection.
We have.
Now we arrive at the absolute explosive end of the cognitive spectrum. High intensity, overwhelming reactions.
The big ones.
The big ones. These are the moments where the sheer magnitude of the input causes a temporary cognitive disruption so profound that it literally renders you speechless.
This is where language has to pull out its most vivid, most dramatic terms, because saying I was very surprised is it's a tragic understatement for this level of reaction.
Completely. We need words that convey physical and verbal incapacitation.
These are not everyday emotions, they are events.
The first one, and perhaps the most joyfully dramatic addition to anyone's advanced vocabulary, is flabbergasted.
I genuinely love this word because, as the source materials subtly suggest, it almost sounds exactly like what it is.
It really does. It has this sudden, impactful sound. It's almost onomatopoeic for a profound, dramatic shock.
It demands a powerful, visceral reaction.
It means being so shocked that, to use the common analogy, your jaw hits the floor and you might even gasp audibly.
The term suggests an almost cartoonish level of surprise, where all rational motor and cognitive functions briefly cease due to the overwhelming, often unexpected nature of the information.
It is the pinnacle of dramatic shock. You would never use flabbergasted because your friend showed up 5 minutes late to coffee.
No, you'd reserve it for when they showed up 5 minutes late riding a unicycle
Having just won the lottery.
while juggling flaming chainsaws. The intensity of the reaction must match the other improbability or magnitude of the input. It's a very visible external response.
And closely related, but focusing specifically on the resulting silence, we have dumbfounded.
Ah, yes. Dumbfounded is another precise tool that focuses less on the visual spectacle and more on the internal communication failure.
Right. It refers quite literally to the feeling of being struck dumb, rendering the person incapable of speech.
Unable to formulate a coherent sound due to the shock.
The source provides a perfect, relatable example that highlights the shock of scale, rather than sheer impossibility.
When he told me the price of the house, I was utterly dumbfounded.
Exactly.
In this case, the shock isn't necessarily illogical like the Latin speaker from before. It's overwhelming.
Right. Often because of scale, magnitude, or profound unexpectedness related to a number, a quantity, or a devastating piece of news.
And the verbal paralysis is the key cognitive indicator here. The brain attempts to process the magnitude, and finding it impossible to categorize or respond to immediately, it results in temporary muteness.
So if we compare these two powerful reactions, flabbergasted implies a strong physical, visible reaction, the gasping, the jaw-dropping, the sudden physical halt.
Whereas dumbfounded emphasizes the verbal failure, the inability to articulate the shock.
The silence that falls because the mind has no words to match the input.
And both are leagues ahead of merely stating, I was very surprised.
And that ultimately is the synthesis of this entire section and really this entire deep dive.
Why precision matters.
Why precision matters in storytelling and sophisticated communication. These words, flabbergasted, dumbfounded, they add immediate, high-impact drama and specificity to your narrative.
They signal to your listener instantly that this event was not minor. It was transformative, cognitively demanding, and profoundly unusual.
If your goal is to be a genuinely engaging communicator or even just a more honest self-reflector, these high-intensity cognitive emotion words are absolutely essential.
They eliminate the need for those weak qualifiers like very, extremely, or incredibly.
Yes.
The word itself, chosen correctly, carries the entire dramatic weight.
So we have just completed an intensive deep dive into the language of nuanced thought, specifically targeting cognitive emotions.
Those feelings tied directly to how we think, understand, and remember.
We've established 4 essential pillars of articulation today, tools that allow you to describe your internal world with far greater specificity. First, we move past simple confusion. We meticulously distinguish between being perplexed, that intellectual knot of complexity,
And being baffled or bewildered, the cognitive shock of the illogical.
and we armed ourselves with the conceptual power of the idiom. I couldn't wrap my head around it.
Second, we found clarity and focus. We contrasted the life-changing transformative epiphany with the smaller functional light bulb moment.
Then we moved to deep, productive focus, the state of being engrossed, and critically separated that positive, productive state from the negative, compulsive connotation of being obsessed.
Third, we wrestled with the complex weight of time and memory. We found the perfect adjective for that gentle, slightly sad longing that requires acknowledging loss.
Wistful.
Wistful. We armed ourselves with the necessary critical perspective of rose-tinted glasses to avoid self-deception.
And we recognize the late arriving wisdom of hindsight is 20/20.
And finally, we found a more mature and sophisticated way to express the emotional fallout of failure, upgrading general regret to the more nuanced, acknowledging, and accepting state of being rueful.
And we reserved our most intense words
Flabbergasted and dumbfounded.
for those rare moments when profound shock demands immediate silence.
What's fascinating here is that every single one of these distinctions allows us to paint a clearer, more honest picture.
Not just for others who listen to our stories, but fundamentally for ourselves.
That's the core philosophy we distill from these sources, and it really bears repeating. True verbal mastery is about linguistic specificity, not conversational speed.
Right.
Choosing precise vocabulary allows you to express the true, complex depth of your human experience, moving beyond the simplistic, generic labels that often dominate everyday, shallow conversation.
So what does this all mean for you? Here is your provocative thought for the listener, your practical challenge for the week.
Now that you have these specialized tools, try to engage in active listening and radical self-assessment for just one day.
When you encounter cognitive friction, don't just accept confusion.
No. Actively try to identify the source. Was I perplexed by the sheer structure and detail of that technical document, or was I completely bewildered by the outcome of a totally unexpected policy change?
When you look back at that old college photo or reflect on an event from a decade ago, ask yourself, is this merely nostalgia? Or is the feeling complex enough to be truly wistful?
Did I just regret that mistake, or was my admission of failure delivered with a self-aware, rueful smile?
Use the words.
Apply the nuance. Only through active, intentional application do these powerful concepts move from passive knowledge into indispensable tools for self-expression and communication mastery.
Keep learning, keep exploring the nuances of language, and thank you for joining us for the deep dive.